Hi, everyone. I'm Stan Mallow. Welcome to Paranormal Yacker. My guest on today's show is Kathleen Marden, a leading researcher of contact with non-human intelligence, a distinguished author, and a much sought-after lecturer. She is a consultant with MUFON and is an advisory board member and consultant to a research committee of the Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Encounters. I'll be talking with Kathleen about her book, Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted. Kathleen Marden, welcome to Paranormal Yacker.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with you again.
Your book has proved itself to be an essential reference guide for those who have experienced contact with non-human intelligent entities, family and friends of those experiences, and in fact, anyone interested in alien abduction, contact, and UFOs. When, Kathleen, did you realize there was a need, and there was indeed, as time has proved, a big need for such a guide?
Well, I was the Mutual UFO Network's Director of Experiencer Research, that team, for 10 years. As the team grew from 3 up to almost 60 people now, I certainly realized there was a need for a comprehensive guide for experiencers. We ended up having 100 to 150 people every month coming to us for guidance, for support. The demand was so high. We wanted to do something to benefit experiencers. So this guide teaches experiencers what to look for, how to investigate their own experiences in order to determine for themselves if they are actually having ET contact. It talks about how to end contact, suggestions on how to, if you don't like it, how to change that contact if you feel that you want to change it to something maybe more positive. There's a guide in there on what to do if you want to go public, what you can expect, the emotional impact, the paranormal overlay, becoming psychic. And there is a worksheet at the end of every chapter for experiencers to help them to work through what they've experienced and to gain more knowledge about themselves. We also include information on commonalities that experiencers share. It's very good for experiencers, people who love them, psychotherapists and hypnotherapists in this field. And I have included some of my most interesting cases as well. So it's not just for experiencers. If you're interested in knowing about some of my investigations, they're there too.
What, Kathleen, is your understanding of modern day contact?
Modern day contact is different than the understanding that we had. For example, back in the 1960s, when my aunt and uncle were the first scientifically investigated case of UFO abduction, is what it was called in that time frame. We knew only that it was gray types who took Betty and Barney. There were 2 different types, the smaller ones who were the sort of the assistants on the craft, the overseers, the guards, and then there were the taller ones who were the ones who communicated with Betty and Barney and the physician. Back in that time frame, they made mistakes. They followed Betty and Barney for at least an hour before they swooped down, only 100 feet above Betty and Barney. They had to stop the car in the middle of the road. So there was this conscious recall of this craft that was approaching them little bit at a time over an extended period of time. And then Barney's conscious recall of observing these non-humans on the craft that actually frightened him so badly. He pulled the binoculars from his eyes, breaking the strap. There was the conscious memory of the code-like sounds striking the trunk of the vehicle, and the evidence the following day in that that location, the shiny spots that had a magnetic field. Betty's dress was torn. Barney's best dress shoes were so deeply scraped he had to buy new shoes. On and on and on with the evidence that they had, physical evidence and circumstantial evidence. And today, we don't have as much evidence. I believe that Betty and Barney have more evidence than anyone has ever acquired. They reported it to Project Blue Book. We no longer have Project Blue Book, but our government is now talking about having something that's not Project Blue Book, but something separate to collect reports. We'll see how that pans out. And like people today, Barney was so traumatized because he had this conscious recall of seeing these entities and feeling that he was going to be captured, he said, like a bug in a net. Betty didn't see this. Betty had other memories, but it was Barney who got out of the car and looked at this craft through binoculars while Betty remained seated in the car. The interior light was on and the car was left running. She retained memories of finding themselves in a new area, of having tall trees all around, of being on a dirt road, of a roadblock, of a fiery orb that seemed to be sitting on the ground. There was a lot of conscious recall. Today's experiencers retain some conscious recall. Most remember having a close encounter with a craft. Most realize that this occurs along family lines. They know that other relatives, biological relatives, have been taken, but there's not as much evidence as there was in that time frame. So we have different methods of collecting evidence. In a sense, we're luckier because I have collected actual photographs, video, just a few seconds of it, of the non-humans coming on an indigo colored beam of light, dropping off that beam, growing in size and density as they near the earth, the ground. So we didn't have that back then. It was just Barney's memory. We now have video evidence of that. We've moved ahead in that way. And the people who collected this are those who followed instructions that are in the book on how to collect evidence. So we're lucky in that way. Unfortunately, people still are traumatized oftentimes until they can work through this and fully remember what happened when they were on the craft.
What are the differences and similarities, if any, between someone being an abductee, a contactee, or an experiencer?
Dr. John Mack coined the term experiencer, and that is a generic kind of term, general term, to encompass all sorts of contact, because we know that contact ranges from contact with the friendly, benevolent human types, all the way to the negative reptilian types and everything in between. Most of it is scientific in nature. About probably 70% is simply scientific, collecting samples from humans, educating humans, teaching humans to fly craft. That's for some people, not for everyone. Imparting information to humans, healing humans. But so many people who don't remember what happened think that it was negative and they were just lab rats. It's much more than that. The funny thing is that Betty and Barney were abductees. And for a long time, we thought, oh, being an abductee is something that's highly negative and nobody would want that to happen. But when we asked that question on both FREE's, the Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation's Experiencer Questionnaire, and the Mutual UFO Network ERT Team's survey, which identified clearly through a measure administered by Dr. Don C. Donderi called the American Personality Inventory, that measured and told us who the UFO abductees are. Okay, so FREE's experiencers or abductees, well, experiencers overall, said 83% would not want their experiences to end if they had a choice. Among MUFONs, we found overall, all the experiencers, 71% said they would not want their contact events to end. Among the abductees, 74% wanted to continue these contact events.
How would you suggest someone goes about investigating their contact experiences?
My first suggestion is to keep a journal and keep it next to your bed. Just handwrite this. And when you have a memory of contact, whether it's in the middle of the night you're remembering, whether it's through downloads of information, or you've just been returned from craft, write the date, write the time frame, write everything that you know. Check your body out. You might have unusual patterned marks on your body. Go into a dark room and take a UV light. You can buy a UV flashlight relatively inexpensively online and check your body out. If you find fluorescence on your body, you can photograph it, and do not use a flash. Use that fluorescent light and then take a photograph without the flash, and keep that in your diary. You want to keep all of your evidence, because the more evidence you acquire, the stronger the case is that you actually are having contact. Now, you might want to use this to make a report and actually have evidence for that, or you might just want to keep it for your own knowledge. Something else that I recommend is, if you really want to get into this, you can install a security camera in your home, or you can use a game camera, which shows the date and the time on each of those slides or on the video. You will first be able to see your sleep patterns during the night, and you will also eventually see period of missing time. For example, in one couple that I've worked with, the husband and wife were awake and they were about to be taken. This was a military couple. She was sitting on the bed looking out the window. He was sitting on the bed looking toward the hallway. And all of a sudden, the camera shut down. It shut down for 2 hours and 11 minutes. Now, this was highly unusual for this to happen. It showed that this time was missing. It showed the camera had shut down and they were both awake. The next time it came on, it showed him lying down in bed, but it showed her in motion as if she were being slipped into bed under the covers again. So this was some interesting information.
What are your findings, Kathleen, regarding what social researchers know about people who claim to have been contacted by ETs?
Well, we know that there is an elevated amount of contact within families. So it is intergenerational in many cases, about 60%. Also, there appears to be a program to upgrade human DNA or humans to move us ahead on an evolutionary scale. We know that experiencers of contact become more spiritual. They become more psychic or intuitive. They become empath. They begin to be able to feel the health of another person's body or in their own body, or to feel another person's emotions as in their own body if they come close to these individuals. If they come close to other experiencers, oftentimes they will feel a strong tingling sensation in the crown of their heads and sometimes all over through their bodies as well. So there are many things that experiencers have in common. One of the questions we asked is, what is your blood type? We asked about Rh positive and Rh negative blood, and what is the blood type? And what we discovered was that among the general population, Rh negative blood is about 15 to 16%. But among those who participated in our MUFON study of 516 experiencers, 31% had Rh negative blood. This is highly elevated, more than twice the 15%. Then among those who are abductees, it's even more elevated to 34%. So elevated, but still the majority have Rh positive blood. So just having Rh negative blood does not mean you're an experiencer.
When a person discovers they haven't been contacted by an ET, which they originally thought happened, but that perhaps perhaps what they experienced was the result of encountering a ghost or some other paranormal phenomena, how would you suggest that person look at and handle such a situation?
I'm primarily interested in helping people who are having negative contact with interdimensional entities. I've devoted a chapter in the book to individuals who are having this negative kind of contact where these entities can just materialize in front of them, taunt them, maybe take them to craft and things or to an underground area where they might have negative experiences. There are ways to elevate your consciousness, elevate your vibrational frequency. So these lower vibrating entities cannot bother you, cannot attach to you. If you go to my website at kathleen-marden.com and you look under my essays, you're going to find 2 essays on this, and you will find how to elevate your vibrational frequency. It comes through a routine that you must follow, where you will meditate on your chakras, clear your chakras, listen to tones that will elevate your frequency. And you must do this at least once a day. If you're having these negative experiences, 2 to 3 times a day are best while you raise your frequency. And also to protect yourself, ground yourself in the morning, protect yourself at night. So these entities cannot come into your environment and be successful. You need to become a more loving individual, which means that for a while, you may not be able to watch movies or news stories that are going to make you feel horrified or fearful. It's that sort of thing that causes these negative entities to attach to humans and to feed off the negativity, feed off the fear, and to grow. So I'm very pleased that finally we've been able to find ways for people to dislodge these negative entities. I've worked on this for a very long time.
How, Kathleen, would you advise experiencers deal with family members, friends, business associates about their contacts with ETs? Do they tell them? Do they keep it a secret? And should they decide to tell them, is there a right and wrong way for them to do so?
I've had so many people who have contacted MUFON's ERT, who have tried to talk to trusted friends or to family members, and they've gotten negative feedback. What have you been drinking? What have you been smoking? Divorce, the loss of friends, even the loss of jobs. You must be very careful about what you decide to do and say. This is the primary reason that we set up the Experiencer Resource Team through MUFON, because through that team, there are non-judgmental listeners. And this is very important. We also have a list of support groups so that people can have contact with other experiencers and talk about that. I am one of 4 people who started a new support group called The Awakening Souls. And there's a link on my website at kathleen-marden.com if you'd like to apply to The Awakening Souls. But this is not a group for people who are only now trying to work through their experiences. There are better groups for that. This group that I and Denise Stoner primarily lead is a group of people who have worked through their fears and who have a greater understanding of contact and who are now ready to reach out to others in support and understanding.
What have you found, Kathleen, in your many conversations with experiences? Which areas of their lives was most affected by their encounters with ETs?
Many areas of their lives, I have to say, but I'm thinking about quality of sleep. That is one area where and some people are taken on a fairly regular basis, and it really is disruptive to their sleep. And then they might wake up feeling totally wiped out in the morning. They might have a headache. They might feel shaky, that sort of thing. So that's not conducive to having good work performance, because you have difficulty if you're trying to work a a regular job and you are having this kind of physiological response. We also know that experiencers of contact, particularly the abductee group, have these migraine headaches, have an increased amount of diagnoses of chronic fatigue and immune dysfunction syndrome, where it might possibly be from their exposure to the craft. There's been some kind of accident and they might have received burns. The federal government has actually come out, Department of Defense released information about the impact on humans of having close contact with ETs, where they do become burned, where they're exposed to microwave radiation or ionizing radiation. That's something that has caused problems for experiencers. Among the general population, it's less than 1%. But among the abductee population, on two separate studies I worked on, one was 37% and one was 45%. So it's significantly elevated. You have to ask these entities when they take you to heal you from this, because they might not even be aware that you are ill as a result of what the mistakes that have been made. So the way to ask is not to wait necessarily for the next time you're taken, but to send telepathic messages to them several times a day. When you're meditating, send these messages. Please heal me. They will, for the most part, heal you if they know that you have this problem.
Should viewers of Paranormal Yacker want to buy Extraterrestrial Contact, What to Do When You've Been Abducted, how can they do that?
That book is available at bookstores. If it's not there, it's for order through bookstores, or you can go to Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. There are other booksellers online. And if you would like an autographed copy, you can purchase it from me at www.kathleen-marden.com, and I'll be happy to send it to you right away. You can do that through PayPal.
Kathleen Marden, I thank you for being my guest on Paranormal Yacker. I wish you success with Extraterrestrial Contact, and thank you for writing it. It's a much needed guide that has helped and will continue to help, I'm sure, countless experiences deal with their ET encounters.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be with you again.
Hi, everyone. This is Stan Mallow, the Paranormal Yacker. I hope you enjoyed the interview you just watched, so that you don't miss any of my upcoming shows, where each week you'll find me yakking with a different outstanding guest. Be sure to subscribe to my free YouTube channel. All you have to do is press the subscribe button on your screen.